It's always fun getting in here on Tuesdays and Thursdays because you may have just heard that I was on the six with Connor Newt, 6 to 7 on 1025 Monday through Friday. So if I'm in here a little bit late, it's because I'm coming over from there, but it's all good. It's all good. College football season is right around the corner. And you know how I know that? Because the initial AP poll was released yesterday, which can only mean one thing is we're close. 2 weeks away from when they kick off in Dublin, Ireland, and then 3 weeks away is when the official college football season starts. But I digress. Our good friends at the AP poll. I one of my favorite traditions, one of my favorite things to do every year, and you guys are going to see this a lot now that we're basically in season, is we're going to have a weekly segment every week in which I bash the AP poll. Now, this week may not be one of those weeks. I do have some thoughts, but overall, I don't want to bury the lead. I didn't think they did a bad job. But normally, I usually like to bash the AP poll. Nothing against the fine folks who have a vote over there, because I personally know some of them. But overall, I do have some issues. So we will get to that. Um, as promised, I'm releasing the initial PK poll, my top 25. That'll also be a new segment. Now that we're in mid August, from here on out, every week we're releasing the PK poll. It is my top 25. It isn't based on my preseason expectations, it's based only on results that happen on the field. I will release the very first of the season tonight. Big Ten record predictions. That's something that we've been doing throughout the Power Four. We started with the Big 12, went to the ACC, SEC. Now we're getting to the Big Ten. And I have some unfortunate injury notes out of fall camp to get to, and then some more fall camp intel to wrap up. So, loaded show, as you might imagine, and very, very exciting nonetheless. But let's get to it. The reaction to the initial AP poll that was released yesterday. Now, here's how I'm going to start. As I said in the beginning, love to bash the AP poll on a regular basis. It's going to be its own segment here coming up. Partly why, because you have this initial ranking that came out. And what I believe about the AP is one. Here are my personal beliefs. Let me start that over. My personal beliefs. 1/4 of a football game means infinitely more to me than whatever preseason expectations I may have of a team. And we've been talking about these teams for months on months on months since Indiana was crowned as the national champion in 2026. We've had plenty of time to talk about these teams. We've gone through spring ball, fall ball is well underway for all of these teams. So I don't care what my preseason PK poll looks like. When the games actually play on the field, my preseason expectations go out the window. I only care about on field results. That's all I care about. With the AP, one of the big issues that I've had with him over the year is all right, they released this poll, but then as the games start to play out, they rely on what their preseason expectations were for a team and they adjust based on that. And listen, Clemson, LSU, Penn State, they were all thought to be national championship contenders in the preseason. Even I thought that they were going to be preseason, or I thought they were going to be national championship contenders, and they weren't. There's a lot of craziness. Nothing is certain anymore in college football. So you can't rely on your preseason expectations of a team. You got to go off on field results. So that's been a big gripe that I've had with the AP. But this one that they released yesterday, I actually don't have a huge issue with. Partly why is because I agree with a lot of it, and there are no games to indicate otherwise. So I'm just going to get into it. AP poll released yesterday. Let's go in order 1 through 25. At number one, Ohio State. No objections there. I understand why Ohio State is number one. They received 40 first place votes. They have one of the best, I may even believe to be the best player in college football in Jeremiah Smith. They have Julian Sand returning for another year at quarterback, who was a Heisman finalist last year, whether you believe that to be fair or not. They're not going to be hurting at wide receiver either. They return all of their starters on the offensive line, or 4 or 5, but a majority of their offensive line returns. You bring in Arthur Smith, a former coordinator in the NFL, to run the show on offense. Matt Patricia returns for his second year as the defensive coordinator. They do have to replace a lot of production on the defensive side of the ball. So if I were to, put little question marks next to Ohio State, there aren't many, but that might be one of them. And again, this is just really nitpicking. Oregon is at number 2. No surprise there. Oregon has one of the best rosters in college football. And a lot of people believe this is the year that Oregon can finally break through in the postseason. Dante Moore, their quarterback, another year in the system. Coordinator change. I'll get to that a little bit later. But they believe that he's ready for the big stage now. So Oregon is at number 3. At number 2. At number 3 is Georgia, the Georgia Bulldogs. Kirby Smart has established a standard there. Won back-to-back national championships in 21-22. Haven't won one since, but Georgia's been the model of consistency in college football. Notre Dame is at number 4. I love Notre Dame. I am very high on Notre Dame right now in the preseason. So Notre Dame is at number 4. They received 6 first-place votes. So Oregon also, I forgot to mention, Oregon received 14 first-place votes. Texas is at 5. The amount of money that they spent in the offseason, the transfer portal class that they brought in, you pair that on top of the high school class, Arch Manning returning for a second year, all that stuff. Go figure. Indiana at number 6. This is where I start to have a big problem with the AP poll. Now, I've never believed that just because you win a national championship, automatically the next season you should be the preseason number 1. I've never believed that. But come on. I hear people talking about Indiana, analyzing Indiana, what they could be this year. And really, the only thing that I hear coming out of their mouths is, well, look at who they lost. Look at what all they lost. A lot of those James Madison guys that Curt Cignetti brought over are no longer there. True. But if you're going to talk about that, there has to be a little bit of nuance involved in the discussion. Who does Indiana have returning? Who do they have coming in? And the answer is they have the number 1 transfer portal class in college football coming in. And their quarterback, Josh Hoover, who they got from TCU, Curt Cignetti says they have all they need at quarterback. If Curt Cignetti says that, listen, guys, I've lived this life. I doubted Indiana in 3 big games last year. That Oregon game in Eugene in the regular season, I doubted in Indiana. I doubted them in the Big Ten championship versus Ohio State. And then I doubted them again in the semifinals versus Oregon again. And I'm just left here with egg all over my face. Don't do this to yourselves. Don't have Indiana ranked outside of the top 5 to start if you're the AP. Curt Cignetti's proved all of us wrong at some point. Just don't do this to yourself. I'm going to move on. Miami is at 7. I have no issue with the teams inside of the top 7 for the AP. I believe they have the right 7 teams. But once I release my PK poll, I'm going to order those teams differently. Texas A&M is at number 8. This is where you start to see a run-on of your SEC teams. A&M at 8, Ole Miss at 9, Oklahoma at 10, LSU at 11. You have Texas Tech in there at 12. They're not SEC, but then Alabama is at number 13. So what this is showing is the conversation that we've all been having. Who's the superior conference between the Big Ten and the SEC? I believe the best conference in college football is the Big Ten. I judge a conference when talking about conference superiority as the conference that has the most teams capable of winning a national championship. Right now, I believe the Big Ten provides us with the most. Oregon, Indiana, Ohio State, whatever order you want to put them, I believe all of them are legitimate national championship contenders. Right now, as the public perceives it, the tier 1 of the SEC is Georgia and Texas. And the way the AP has it, they have Ohio State and Oregon above where Texas is at number 5, and then Indiana at 6. Georgia's in there at 3. So when you have 3 teams from the Big Ten in the top 6, that shows you what the AP thinks of them. And then you just have this cluster of SEC teams in the middle, which I believe represents the depth of the conference. Regardless of what you believe about the SEC, I do believe they're the most competitively balanced conference in college football, which I don't think is a stretch. There are 9 teams represented in this AP poll. Let's continue with the list. USC is at 14. You have BYU at 14. So USC and BYU are tied at 14. You have Michigan at 16, Washington at 17, Penn State at 18. So you see a run of Big Ten teams here in the middle as well. SMU is at 19, Tennessee at 20. That's a question mark. That is something that Heather Dinich, I know she came on Pat McAfee yesterday, had a big issue with. And I can understand, I can reason with Heather. I go throughout Tennessee's roster, and I know they've had some injuries in the month of August, which I will also get to a little bit later on in the show, so make sure you're staying with me. Tennessee has had a brutal month of August. But if you go and you look at the roster, it's a very talented roster. A lot of these guys were blue chips coming out of high school. The only question is at quarterback. Is it going to be Faison Brandon? Is it going to be George McIntyre? And neither of those guys have experience playing in college. They don't have experience playing in the SEC, but outside of that, I feel comfortable with the rest of the roster. So I will have Tennessee in my top 25, but I don't know if I'll have them as high as 20. Utah is at 21. Iowa, another Big Ten, at 22. Houston at 23. Louisville at 24. And Missouri at 25. So if you want a breakdown of this, 9 teams from the SEC are represented in here. 8 teams from Big Ten. So the AP is telling you who the top 2 conferences are in college football, which is no surprise to us. 4 teams from the Big 12, 3 from the ACC, and then you have Notre Dame in there. No group of 6 team represented in the AP poll, the initial AP poll. Boise State is the highest ranked group of 6. They're on the outside looking in. They're at 28. They received 43 votes to be in the poll. Another note, there's no Clemson in there. Thank goodness. When the coaches poll came out and they had Clemson at 23, I honestly thought there had been use of drugs in there. There's no Clemson. Not that I have anything against Clemson. I just don't think they're a top 25 team. Clemson, the first time they've been unranked in the preseason AP poll since 2011. So those are some pretty staggering headlines from this AP poll. But my only big issues with it, again, I love to bag on the AP poll more than anybody. But the big issue, I don't have a lot of them. I honestly agree with most of it, but Indiana at 6, I think it's criminal to have Indiana outside of the top 5, and I would have USC a little bit higher. Everything else, I think they got the right 25 teams. It's just a matter of how you want to order them. I definitely know they got the top 7 teams correct. Again, it's just a matter of order. So I'm not going to bury the lead. This is why we all came here tonight. This is why we all came here. I know the audience. I know it's a fairly new audience because we just started the show a little over a month ago. But I put out on Twitter that I was going to release the highly anticipated PK poll, my top 25, to start out the year. I know that's why you all are here, so let's just dig into it. The PK poll for 2026, my top 25. Let's start with number 1. At number 1, I have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Notre Dame is, I believe, if you were to drop Notre Dame in the SEC, I think Notre Dame would win the SEC. If you were to drop Notre Dame in the Big Ten, I might even have them win the Big Ten as well. I am infinitely high on Notre Dame this year. I believe not only is the roster super duper talented, but I've seen clips of them practicing and just hearing things out of fall camp. The chip, I wouldn't even call it a chip at this point. I'd call it a boulder on their shoulder after getting left out of the college football playoff last year. They're playing with that this year. And I think it's going to be scary for a lot of teams. Plus, you mix in the fact that they have a very manageable schedule. I think Notre Dame is pretty much a lock to make it to the college football playoff. But as you saw from my college football playoff predictions, I ended up having Notre Dame winning the whole thing. So I have Notre Dame at number 1, but I couldn't go too far without putting Ohio State in there. I have Ohio State at number 2 for obvious reasons. I think we're all in agreement there. Ohio State was number 1 in the coaches poll. They were number 1 in the AP poll. So I have Ohio State at number 2. At number 3, another team from the Big Ten, I have Oregon. I've been doing a lot of research on Oregon. I've been doing a lot of, putting my ear to the ground, hearing what's coming out of fall camp in Eugene. Dante Moore back for his second year as the starter. That defensive line depth, seriously, they might have the deepest defensive line in college football. Certainly very comfortable, not just with the front seven, but with the defense as the whole. They have a really good secondary as well with Coy Parrish, a transfer from Minnesota at safety. He was the number 1 safety of the transfer portal. They got him to replace Dylan Thieneman. Brandon Finney at corner, who was a standout in the Orange Bowl last year versus Texas Tech as a true freshman. That defense is going to be great. I think they have a great 1-2 punch at running back. Love the receiver room. Love their interior on the offensive line. They do have to replace some pieces, but overall, I'm willing to trust it. I have Oregon at number 3. I put out a short yesterday that I think it was criminal to have Indiana outside of the top 5, and it is. So I have Indiana at number 4. They're the defending national champions, although I don't know what they're defending. I mean, they are. They won the national championship in 2026. But with what Indiana was able to accomplish last year, it attracts talent. It attracts really highly rated recruits. And they had the number 1 transfer portal in the country come in over the spring. And who are we to doubt Kurt Signetti? Who are we to doubt little old Indiana after what they did last year? Do you want to try that? I personally don't. So I have Indiana at number 4. At number 5, the first SEC team that I have ranked, the Texas Longhorns. Now, I debated at this 4 through 5 spot because I have Indiana at 4, I have Texas at 5, and I have Georgia at 6. I know the SEC's been Georgia's conference. I know it has been. But there's something about the feel in Austin right now. This is the best roster that Steve Sarkisian's had in Austin. It feels like championship or bust for Texas. You just go position by position throughout this roster. And it is up there with the very best in the sport. What they were able to accumulate in the portal, obviously the way they develop players coming out of high school to get them to where they are now. You have Arch Manning returning for his second year at quarterback. Texas is a national championship contender, and they have one of the best rosters in the sport. So I have the Texas Longhorns at number 5, and I have Georgia at 6. I'm comfortable ranking Georgia anywhere between the 5 to 8 range. I don't know if I'd have them as high as the AP has them at number 3, but I do trust Georgia. I do trust the floor of the roster. I think it's a very high floor for Georgia, but the ceiling is yet to be determined. Obviously, they won a national championship 4 years ago, but Gunnar Stockton, what does he look like another year as the starter? I don't know about the wide receiver situation. I don't feel the best about that, but again, the model of consistency that Kirby Smart has established firmly should have Georgia in playoff contention once again. So I have Georgia at number 6, and then I have Miami at 7. I believe the 7 teams that I just listed are your consensus top 7 teams. Again, it's whatever order you want to put them. But Miami at 7, they do have to replace their tackles, and they do have some churn on that offensive line. But who else would you want developing your offensive line than none other than Mario Cristobal, who played offensive line at Miami and is an offensive lineman by trade, and that's his expertise. I'm willing to blindly trust that unit as long as Mario Cristobal is the head coach. And then defense, man, the jump they made in the first year under their defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman was just ridiculous. It was fantastic, and he's back for another year as their defensive coordinator. I know you have to replace Ruben Bain. I know you have to replace Akeem Mesidor, but the cupboard is not bare down in Coral Gables. They have some pieces. Now, it may not be Ruben Bain, it may not be Akeem Mesidor, but collectively as a unit, I think they'll be just fine. And not only that, but I feel they upgraded at quarterback. I think Darian Mintz is an upgrade from Carson Beck. So I have Miami at 7. Draw a line. Now we get to your second tier, because I believe the way that I have my poll set up, I believe there are 4 tiers in this top 25. We enter tier 2. Tier 2, I have Ole Miss at 8. Trinidad Chambliss, one of the most electrifying players in college football, just a complete gamer. I think he'll actually be better in year 2 than he was in year 1. So I have Ole Miss at 8. At number 9, the team they'll play week 3, the LSU Tigers. That team, at least on paper, I know games aren't playing on paper, but at least on paper, that roster is one of the more talented in the country, certainly in the top 10. And I believe Lane Kiffin, a firmly established tier 2 level coach in college football, they can prove something this year. They can prove something this year. So I have LSU at number 9. I have Texas A&M at 10. Marcel Reed thought was great down the stretch of the regular season last year. Obviously, things didn't end how they wanted to in that playoff game versus Miami, but I trust the defense under Mike Elko. I like Marcel Reed. Now he does have a new offensive coordinator. Colin Klein's no longer calling plays, as he's now the head coach at Kansas State, but he's going to have some weapons to throw to. And I trust the run game. I like the offensive line. So I have Texas A&M at 10. I have Oklahoma at 11. This is another one of those scenarios where who's your head coach? Brent Venables, a defensive coordinator by trade. I will trust Oklahoma on defense as long as Brent Venables is there. You have a fully healthy John Mateer, who before the thumb injury was the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. Isaiah Satania at wide receiver, just love that connection there. My question with Oklahoma is how effectively are they going to be able to run the football? That is one of the biggest question marks I have with Oklahoma, but I have them at 11. At number 12, I told you I would have USC higher, and I do. I have USC at number 12. I believe they will make the playoffs this year. It is playoff or bust for Lincoln Riley. We've talked about that on this show. Year 3 for Jaden Mayava. The line of scrimmage on both sides, offense and defense, finally looks Big Ten-esque. Looks like it's able to compete in a conference like the Big Ten. The defense looks to be trending up, and they have Gary Patterson as defensive coordinator. Not worried about the run game, not worried about the offensive line. They do have to replace, Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon, but I do trust their wide receiver room. I've never really doubted the offense under Lincoln Riley. So I have USC at 12. At 13, this is where I have the first team from, outside of the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, and then Notre Dame's in there as an independent. First team from the Big 12. I have Texas Tech. I like the overall roster. I like the overall roster, maybe even a little better than I did last year. But everything that went down with Brendan Sorsby and them trying to upgrade at quarterback and the whole betting thing didn't work out for them. And now they turn to Will Hammond, who was actually on the team last year, was the backup to Baron Morton. He won a couple of games for him when Baron Morton went down with injury. So Will Hammond's a capable quarterback, but it may be a similar result to what happened to Texas Tech last year, where you're good enough to win the Big 12. You get to the college football playoff, but then when you get matched up with one of these other teams listed ahead of them, then you kind of get exposed a little bit. That's no indictment on Texas Tech, but they tried to upgrade at the quarterback situation. They just didn't see it coming. So I have Alabama another one of these viewed as tier 2 teams in the SEC. I have them at 14. Very similar situation with Oklahoma, where they could not run the football last year. And I don't know how much worse the run game could be at a place like Alabama, but it needs to improve this year. And then you throw in the quarterback situation with who's going to start. Is it going to be Keelan Russell? Is it going to be Austin Mack? I think both are capable. Whoever they end up naming a starter, I think both of them are very capable at playing quarterback in the SEC. But I go throughout Alabama's roster, and I just don't feel like they upgraded a whole lot at the spots compared to where it was last year. Now, last year's team was good enough to make the college football playoff and win a game. This Alabama team is certainly capable of doing that. But if we're talking about anything higher, I just don't know. So I have Alabama at 14. Draw a line. Every team 8 through 14 that I just mentioned, that's tier 2 for me in this top 25. Now we move to tier 3. I have BYU at 15, another team from the Big 12. There's not much of a gap between Texas Tech, where they are at 13, to where BYU is at 15. I do believe Texas Tech is they're firmly in tier 1 with BYU. I believe BYU's in that tier 1. But Texas Tech is ahead of them for obvious reasons. But BYU basically returns everybody from last year outside of a couple players. And they're older. And I love Kalani Sitake. I love the formula that they have on BYU. They don't deviate from how they play, and it works for them. They went 11-1 in the regular season, ended up losing to the same team twice. But it wouldn't surprise me if BYU is able to win the Big 12 this year. I have BYU at 15. We're going to see a run of Big 10 teams here. I have Michigan at 16. I have Penn State at 17. And I have Washington at 18. Washington is the team that I look at, and I think they can muddy this thing up for the rest of the field. Because you look at Washington's schedule, and 5 of their first 6 games they get at home. But they have to go to USC. They have Iowa in there. They have Penn State. They have Indiana. And then they end the season at Oregon. Think about if Washington were to upset some of those teams, how that could muddy things up in the Big Ten. Washington, I look at, and out of this list of teams that I just named so far, that's the team that I circle that could really mess things up. Really mess things up for when it comes to playoff pictures, Big Ten races, and that sort of thing. Draw another line. That's tier 3, very short tier, only 4 teams. But then we get to the tier 4. And this is, we can debate order on these teams, but they deserved a spot in this preseason top 25. But the order is kind of not irrelevant, but jumbled. I have SMU at 19. Love Kevin Jennings at quarterback for him. Houston at 20. I talked about this on the very first episode we ever did on the show, that they're my dark horse in the Big 12. Really like Houston's overall roster. Definitely think that they can take a step better than they were last year. And last year, they got 10 wins. So I have Houston at 20. Utah's at 21. Losing Jason Beck as your offensive coordinator, huge blow. They do return their quarterback, Devin Dampier. They return their running back, Wayshawn Parker, but they have to replace a lot on that offensive side of the ball. Not a lot of returning starts on the offense. And defense, Morgan Scalley's their head coach now, who was their defensive coordinator last year, but now he's assuming head coaching duties, so he already has a lot on his plate now. I'm not just willing to assume that the defense is just going to stay where it was or even get better now that Morgan Scalley has all these different responsibilities going on. But Houston on paper as of right now, I'm fine having them at 21. I have Missouri at 22. One of the best running backs in college football is Ahmad Hardy. Austin Simmons is at quarterback, transferred from Ole Miss. Austin Simmons was good enough where Lane Kiffin named him the starter at the beginning of last year over Trinidad Chambliss. Now, Trinidad Chambliss is better, but Lane Kiffin thought very highly of Austin Simmons, and I think that we should too. I have Iowa at 23. You know what you're going to get out of Iowa. The formula doesn't change. Run the ball, play good defense, not a lot of explosive plays, but just solid. I have Louisville at 24. I love what Jeff Brom is able to do with transfer portal quarterbacks. And this year it's Lincoln Kine-Holtz, a transfer from Ohio State. A great running back in Isaac Brown. Great run game in general. Love the defense for Louisville. I have Louisville at 24, which, by the way, I'll see them in Nashville when they take on Ole Miss in the Music City kickoff. And then this is where I have Tennessee. I have Tennessee at 25. I thought 20 was a little too high for my liking, but I love the roster. It's just a matter of the discussion that we're all having. Who's going to start at quarterback? That's what it boils down to for Tennessee. But if you go and you look at the AP poll and you go and you look at the teams that were receiving votes, if you have an issue of Tennessee being in the top 25, my question to you is, well, where else would you put them? Because it's kind of interchangeable once you get past the 18 mark. I mean, yeah, a lot of these teams deserve to be ranked at least to start the season, but you can make the case for a lot of teams. It's really a jumbled mess once you get past that point. So in case you missed it, I'm going to put out my the PK poll so that you can go back and you can see it visibly. Wish I had a way to show it on the program here, but I'll go and I'll post it on social media. So make sure that you're following me on the socials, first of all, so that you can see it. And I actually haven't plugged this yet, but make sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel at Parker_Kelley10. Or I'm sorry, that's my social media handle. Make sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, The Air Raid with Parker Kelley. Type it in, search it up, subscribe. If you're watching the video, like it. I've been very impressed by our channel analytics so far. Again, this show is a little over a month old, and our analytics have been off the charts compared to what I thought they might be. So that is a huge credit to you guys, huge credit to people watching. So make sure that you're subscribed. All you got to do, it's free. Just click the button, and you get notified when we go live, and you get notified to all our content. Again, it's free, doesn't sign you up for anything, just really helps us. That's enough of my begging. We still have a lot of show to go. So let's get into Big Ten record predictions. I'll try to be a little quicker on this than I was with revealing my top 25, but so excited to do that. That's going to be a fun segment every week throughout the season. Let's start with Oregon. What's my record prediction for the Oregon Ducks for 2026? I've been back and forth on this between 10-2 and 11-1. I have Oregon making the playoff. I may even have them represented in the Big Ten championship game once I release my college football playoff 2.0 predictions. But you just look at the schedule for Oregon, and it's a lot tougher compared to what it was last year. Think about it. You're at USC in week 4. You have to go to Illinois on October 24th. You're at Ohio State on November 7th. You have Michigan in there, and then you end the season with Washington. That is a tough schedule. Certainly one of the tougher schedules in the Big Ten. I'm going to say 11-1. I'm going to say 11-1 for the Oregon Ducks. I do think they will slip up in Columbus if I had to pick. That game at Columbus on November 7th, that is going to be a challenge. But I think Oregon is a good enough team where 11-1, certainly not out of the realm of possibility, and that would maybe even guarantee them a spot in the Big Ten championship game, probably would. And with that comes a bid in the college football playoff for the 3rd consecutive season. Let's go to Ohio State. Ohio State. You want to talk about tough schedules in the Big Ten. Let me just read this off to you. For Ohio State, you have at Texas in week 2, Illinois in week 4. You're at Iowa the next week. You have to go to Indiana on October 17th, which, by the way, biggest home game in the history of Indiana football. You have to go to USC on Halloween, going cross-country for that one. You have Oregon on November 7th. You have to travel to Nebraska on November 21st, my birthday. And then you end the season, the game with Michigan. Ohio State may be the best team in the country. But you go through that roster, and it is incredibly challenging, just a meat grinder, something that we're not used to seeing with Ohio State. Usually, Ohio State schedules are pretty light, but this is not light. This is anything but light. It's hard for me to envision a world in which Ohio State doesn't go throughout the season without slipping up a couple of times. So I have Ohio State at 10-2. Moving to Indiana, the national champs of 2026. So I'm not going to come on here and say that Indiana is going to replicate what they did last year. I am still high on them. I absolutely do believe they can contend for a national championship once again. The quarterback situation, Josh Hoover, Kurt Cignetti, very confident that he's everything that they need at quarterback. So if he says it, I'm willing to trust it too. They have one of the best left tackles, I even may argue the best left tackle in college football, in Carter Smith. You go to the defensive side of the ball. The linebacking core, I envision as being top 3 nationally. The defensive line only got stronger within the last couple of weeks, adding Stephen Daly. The secondary, really good secondary for Indiana, despite having to replace some pieces. But this is something that we're not used to talking about with Indiana, because they have a really, really cupcake non-conference schedule, right? You have North Texas, you have some dude named Howard, you have Western Kentucky, and then you start conference play with Northwestern, at Rutgers, at Nebraska. Indiana, in theory, should be 6-0 by the time they play Ohio State at home in Bloomington on October 17th. Then you have at Michigan the next week. USC's in there. You're at Washington on November 21st. That is a lot tougher Big Ten slate for Indiana than what we're used to seeing in the last couple of years from them. So I think Indiana's going to go 10-2. But a 10-2 Indiana is still good enough to get in the college football playoff. And if it comes down to, you have an 11-1 Oregon, you have a 10-2 Ohio State, 10-2 Indiana, your top 3 teams in that conference, that next spot in the Big Ten championship may come down to that Ohio State game. Partly why I say that's the biggest game in Indiana football history, the biggest home game. Huge stakes are on the line in that game. So I have Indiana going 10-2. For USC, I've been way too high on USC to backtrack now. But when talking about USC, and we typically don't talk about this with teams in the Big Ten, but USC was given no favors on their schedule. We know it's playoff or bust for Lincoln Riley and USC, partly because there's no other choice. It's year 5. You have to make the playoffs. I had to fight against my better judgment on this. But this is what it boils down to for USC. They have 5 games where they have Oregon, they have Washington, both of those games at home. They're at Penn State for the whiteout game. They're at Indiana, and they also have Ohio State. That game is at home. If you're USC, in order to make the playoff, you have to get 3 of those games, at least. You have to get 3 of those games. I have USC going 10-2. I'm trusting that the defense is massively improved. I'm trusting that line of scrimmage is going to be able to compete with the best of the best in the conference. Call me crazy, but I have USC making the playoffs, and I have them going 10-2 as well. Moving on, Michigan. A lot of this is dependent on Bryce Underwood. And Jason Beck is their offensive coordinator, who Kyle Whittingham brought over from Utah. And Jason Beck, historically, has had great success as the offensive play caller. A few years ago, he was at New Mexico. he took a team that was ranked 44th in the country offensively to 4th in the span of 1 year. At Utah last year, he took an offense that was ranked 104th in 2024 and took him to 4th this last year. Will he be able to do the same at Michigan? Will he be able to get every last drop out of the sponge out of Bryce Underwood as possible? I want to see if the magic continues. I actually have Michigan going 9-3 this year. You have a game at Iowa, you're at Minnesota, bye week, you have Penn State, Indiana, at Oregon, at Ohio State to end the year. Again, you're just seeing teams in the Big Ten disproportionately with tougher schedules than others. And Michigan has another one of those tough schedules. And if you're looking at their schedule today, they face 6 teams that are in the preseason top 25. If Michigan goes 9-3 this year, I don't think it's a bad year, but I also want to know what Bryce Underwood looks like. Moving on to the Washington Huskies. Washington, I'm just going to venture out on a limb here and say that they'll be 4-0 by the time they have to go to Los Angeles to take on USC. Washington State, Utah State, Eastern Washington, Minnesota, all at home. Washington's going to be 4-0 by the time they go to USC. And have that game circled. October 3rd, Washington at USC. As I talked about when I was reacting to the AP poll, Washington at 17, that is the dark horse. That is the team that can mess up so much for other teams in the Big Ten because they play Iowa, they play Penn State, they play Indiana, they play Oregon, they play USC. All of these teams which are hopeful to be in the race for the Big Ten championship, you get a couple of upsets in there. I wouldn't call them upsets, but you get Washington knocking off a couple of those teams, and suddenly that picture looks a lot muddier. I have Washington going 9-3 this year. For Iowa, model of consistency out there in Iowa City under Kirk Ferentz. I think 8-4 is fair for Iowa this year. Going to have a good run game. Going to have a good offensive line because when does Iowa not have a good offensive line? Defense is going to be good. Don't expect a lot of explosive plays down the field. I have Iowa going 8-4. For Penn State, this is what I was talking about. Teams that disproportionately have harder schedules in the Big Ten compared to what Penn State has to, for example. I mean, let me just read this Penn State schedule to you. Marshall, I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. Penn State has to travel to Temple to play a game in week 2. For those of you that think I was making that up, let me repeat that. Penn State has to travel to Temple for a game in week 2. Okay. Buffalo in week 3, Wisconsin week 4. They're at Northwestern, USC, at Michigan, Purdue, at Washington, Minnesota, Rutgers, at Maryland. If Matt Campbell were to set up his first schedule ever in the Big Ten, that's probably how he would have it set up. Where your really tough games that I'm circling if I'm Penn State are USC, Michigan on the road there, and you're at Washington. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Penn State's able to go 10-2 this year. I don't have them going 10-2. I think 9-3 is pretty fair for Penn State, but I mean, when you're talking about playoff contention for Penn State, I don't think it's a crazy conversation. But I have Penn State going 9-3. For Illinois, Brett Bielema really doesn't get enough credit for how good of a job that he's done at Illinois. They have 19 wins the last 2 years. 9 wins last year, 10-win season before that. I really like Caden Hauser, who's going to be their quarterback this year, transferred from East Carolina. Before that was at Michigan State. One of the better dual threat quarterbacks, I think, in the portal. But I have Illinois. I see them as being a tier 3 team in the Big Ten. I have Illinois going 8-4 this year. For Minnesota, I've talked about Minnesota being maybe a dark horse team in the Big Ten. Pretty tough schedule for Minnesota, but I have Minnesota going 6-6, which would guarantee them bowl eligibility once again. Nebraska, year 4 for Matt Rule. Can't fire him because you just extended him. When Penn State tried to come after him and tried to poach him from Lincoln, you doubled down and you extended him through, I think it's 2031. So unless you want to pay a massive buyout, which I wouldn't suggest, then you're riding with Matt Rule. So year 4, what does it look like for Nebraska? A transfer portal quarterback, Anthony Calandria, by way of UNLV. For Nebraska, it's not going to be. I don't see Nebraska being in playoff contention this year. But I do have good news. If you're Will Compton, you're out there listening. Nebraska could be 5-0 by the time they play Indiana about midway through their schedule here. Think about it. You get Ohio on September 5th, Bowling Green on September 12th, North Dakota, you're at Michigan State, and you have Maryland. If I'm Nebraska and I have the roster talent edge over all those teams that I just listed, you should be 5-0 by the time you host Indiana on October 10th. But it's a rough 4-game stretch following that. Let me read this 4-game stretch to you. You have Indiana at home. You go to Oregon. You have a bye week. Then you have Washington at home, which I'm told is going to be the blackout game on Halloween, which would be a great environment. And then you're at Illinois. That's all in the period of 4 games. That's a really tough back half for Nebraska. I have them going 8-4, which would be a 1-win improvement from where they were last year. Would also get them back to a bowl game this year. For Northwestern, God did them no favors when it came to scheduling. Woo! South Dakota State in week 1, bye week. Because who amongst us doesn't need a bye week after playing South Dakota State? No offense to the Jackrabbits. But you think about having a bye week after week 1, and then you have 11 straight games. They have at Indiana in there. They have Penn State in there. They're at Oregon. They have Iowa. They're at Ohio State. They end the year with Illinois. It's going to be a meat grinder of a schedule for the Wildcats. The good news is their offensive coordinator this year, pretty well known around the college football community, Chip Kelley. I think that this will be – the record may not show it, but this could be an improved team in 2026. I have Northwestern getting back to a bowl. I have them going 6-6, which I think would be a good season considering that schedule. And they're trying to up their financial support up there in Evanston to try to make their football team a little bit better. For Wisconsin, Luke Fickell, there's no question that he's on the hot seat. A lot of this is dependent on quarterback play. They've been stake-bitten at the quarterback position, but they got a transfer portal quarterback by the name of Colton Joseph out of Old Dominion. One of the better quarterbacks in the portal, I believe. I have Wisconsin going 6-6 this year, which would get them to a bowl game, but is 6-6 going to be good enough to save Luke Fickell's job? I don't know. UCLA, Bob Chesney coming over by way of James Madison. I've talked about Bob Chesney very glowingly on the show. 16 seasons as a head coach, only 1 losing season. The rest, he's had a winning season, 15 years as a head coach. So he goes to UCLA. He takes over a program that went 4-8 last year. You returned your quarterback in Nico Iamaleava. A lot of this for me is blind faith in a guy like Bob Chesney because I believe this hire will work out for the Bruins. Getting to a bowl in your first year at UCLA, I don't think is a bad year. So I have UCLA going 6-6 this year. Now we start to get to where it's not really fun to talk about, and I can kind of just blow right through this. Michigan State, first year under Pat Fitzgerald, a lot of work to do. If they were able to make a bowl game this year, that would be a great season for them. I don't see that. I have Michigan State going 4-8. For Maryland, 2 straight 4-8 seasons for them. I have them going 4-8 once again, and if they do go 4-8, Mike Locksley is probably fired because he's definitely on the hot seat. Purdue, I have Purdue going 2-10. Don't really need to elaborate there. Not a good situation in Purdue right now. And then for Rutgers, what you don't know about Rutgers is because they're not talked about a lot. They have one of the better receivers in the Big Ten by the name of KJ Duff. He was a 1,000-yard receiver last year, was a preseason All-American. And then they have a running back by the name of Antoine Raymond who rushed for over 1,300 yards last year and 13 touchdowns. So they have good players. Just outside of that, Greg Schiano, if they go anything less than 6-6, he's probably fired too. I have Rutgers going 3-9, which would probably mean not good things coming for Greg Schiano and Rutgers. So those are my Big Ten record predictions. I will also have those out on social media at some point. I'll also clip this video and post it up separately so that you can go back and watch just in case you missed it. Still a lot of show to get to. Appreciate everybody that's been with us live throughout the show. I have some injury notes, and this brings me no joy to talk about here. But this situation that I'm about to talk about could have been a lot worse. Texas left tackle Trevor Goosby left practice early yesterday with a knee injury, and when I first saw the report, did not sound good. Did not sound good coming out of fall camp over there in Austin. However, had an MRI today, and it's been confirmed that it's only a bone bruise. So there's no timetable for his return, but it certainly appears that a serious injury was avoided there. ESPN has him as the number 1 ranked left tackle in the mock draft upcoming for 2027. He'll be protecting the blind side of Arch Manning. So you lose him, and that's a not great situation in Austin, but crisis avoided, only a bone bruise for Trevor Goosby. Tennessee, it has been not a great month for them in terms of injuries in the month of August. Safety Edris Farouk suffered a season-ending injury in practice on Friday with a torn patellar tendon in his right knee. Started 13 games for them last season. He ranked 3rd on the team in tackles with 76. Was 2nd in the SEC when it comes to forced fumbles with 4. Not great. Not a great situation for Tennessee anytime you lose a starter on the back end of your defense. So TJ Metcalf, a transfer from Michigan, and DeJuan Lane, a transfer from Penn State, who followed Jim Knowles over. They're going to have to fill the void there in Knoxville. You pair all this with the Arian Carter suspension, which we talked about ad nauseum. Jaden Harmon, who I mentioned briefly on the last show, was going to be a depth piece for the Vols at linebacker. He's done for the year. And then Jadias Richard, a transfer from Miami, also had a season-ending upper body injury. So for Tennessee, it's just been a rough month in terms of losing guys for the year. South Carolina, I talked about how you have the big 3, right? Lenore Sellers at quarterback, Nick Harbor at receiver, and Dylan Stewart at edge rusher. But outside of that, I just have a lot of question marks about this team. And something that I needed to have a little bit more confirmation on to feel more comfortable about South Carolina for 2026 was the people that would be catching passes for Lenore Sellers. Well, as of Sunday night, it has been confirmed that they have lost 2 wide receivers to season-ending injuries. Jaden Sellers, who's Lenore's younger brother, and Oklahoma transfer Jaden Gibson. They're both out for the year with season-ending lower body injuries. Again, I didn't feel great about the overall roster outside of the big 3, but that receiver room just got a whole lot thinner. So not great for South Carolina this year. One more thing to get to when it just comes to news and notes from around the country. UNC did name their starter at quarterback, North Carolina. They named Billy Edwards Jr. Their starting quarterback today. He edged out Miles O'Neill, who was a Texas A&M transfer, for their starting quarterback position. Billy Edwards is a solid quarterback, spent some time at Maryland, spent some time at Wisconsin last year, was injured, but we all know how this is going to end. The Bill Belichick era has gotten off the rails very, very quickly. And it may not matter how solid of a quarterback you are because things are going downhill faster than we can possibly imagine at North Carolina. I saw an article on ESPN today about Dante Moore. A great article on ESPN. Highly encourage you to go check it out at some point. Written by Mark Schlabach, talking about Dante Moore. And I've talked a lot about Dante Moore, not necessarily on this program, but on other shows that I've been a part of. When Dante Moore made the decision to not enter the NFL draft and come back to school, I applauded the decision, and I also saw it coming from miles away. Because what I know about Dante Moore is he's not rash to make decisions. He's not quick to make decisions when it comes to determining the course of one's life. He's very thoughtful, strategic, and he goes about it in a way which, from a maturity standpoint, is really, really impressive. So let me kind of backtrack a little bit. When Dante Moore was a freshman and he was the starter at UCLA, things didn't go well that season. He transferred to Oregon with the understanding that this was when Dillon Gabriel came in from the transfer portal. Dante Moore transferred in understanding that Dillon Gabriel was going to be the starter in Eugene and willingly chose to go to school there and be a member of the Oregon Ducks football team because he knew that he was not ready for college football yet at the highest level. So allowing him to sit and learn for a season, I think that takes a lot of maturity on his part. And then this year, obviously, like if you watched both of the Indiana games and you watched the most recent one in the Peach Bowl in Atlanta in the college football playoff semifinals, the lights got a little too bright for Dante Moore. So when he made the decision to come back to school, I not only applauded it, but was very impressed from a maturity standpoint because he turned down maybe $50 million guaranteed. People were talking about him as maybe being the second best quarterback, maybe a top 2 pick behind Fernando Mendoza in this last NFL draft. But the truth of the matter is, if Dante Moore is able to replicate what he did last year, then you think that he would be he would be a high pick in this upcoming NFL draft. So I applaud the decision for Dante Moore to come back to school. But this article talked a lot about his mental health and how he was handling the expectations as a true freshman at UCLA when things didn't go well to now you're at Oregon and things were what they were last year. I know the season didn't end on how any of them wanted the season to end. But it's tough when you're at that level to handle those expectations. And I thought Dante Moore has done a good job, but this article, I'm not going to spoil it, but talked about how he dealt with that behind the scenes. So again, I highly encourage you to go check it out. If you haven't read it already, it is out on ESPN, written by Mark Schlabach. Admittedly, I'm openly rooting for Dante Moore. I'm very impressed by the maturity. And I honestly, we're big Dante Moore fans on the show. So wishing him in Oregon nothing but the best, but no better way to lead into that than some fall camp intel for the Oregon Ducks. And this is how we're going to wrap up the show here. Again, as I talked about in the PK poll, having them at number 3, they have one of the most talented rosters in the country, and that's reflected in my ranking. Some question marks, though, for Oregon. They're replacing both coordinators. Will Stein, former offensive coordinator, now the head coach at Kentucky. Tosh Lupoy, who was your defensive coordinator last year, is now the defensive coordinator at Cal. So now you have Drew Maringer, who was promoted from your tight ends coach to your offensive coordinator. You have Chris Hampton, who's promoted from your DBs coach to defensive coordinator. How does that look in 2026 when you're replacing both your offensive coordinators? With Dante Moore, who we just talked about, how does he perform in the big games? How does he perform when the spotlight is on and the lights are the brightest? What I'm hearing a lot of buzz about in Eugene is the running back room between Jordan Davidson and De'Aaron Hill. Both of these guys were freshmen last year. They combined for over 1,300 yards and 20 touchdowns. Hill, with De'Aaron Hill, he's primarily a speed threat, but what their running backs coach has talked about, and Rashad Samples, he's talked about how De'Aaron Hill's progression this offseason has been so significant that he'll basically be unrecognizable this year. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. Again, that running game last year was not necessarily a surprise at how good it was, but the fact that that output was coming from two freshmen was very, very impressive. The wide receiver room, obviously one of the more stacked in the country, with DeCorian Moore, who's a 5-star coming out of high school, Jeremiah McClellan, who was one of the top 3 targets for this team last year, and Evan Stewart, who missed all of last year with an injury. Some of you may recognize that name. He was at Texas A&M before Oregon, another one of these former 5-star guys. But Jalen Lott is another 5-star, true freshman, by the way, out of high school in Texas. He's been turning heads in practice from the coaching staff, from the media that's been covering, made a lot of contested catches. He could have a pretty significant role for the offense this year. So the wide receiver room is certainly not a concern for the Ducks at this point in time. High praise for tight end Jamari Johnson, who you remember who Oregon had last year in Kenyon Sadiq. That dude was a freak. That dude was an alien. And there are whispers that they may even feel a little bit better about their tight end this year in Jamari Johnson, who was Kenyon Sadiq's backup last year. They may even feel a little bit better about Jamari Johnson. So we'll have to see. That's high praise, considering that Kenyon Sadiq was a first-round pick last year. And then the front seven, maybe the best in college football. Deep on the defensive line, deep at linebacker. Impact player on the defense for me is going to be Coy Parrish, a safety. Best safety coming out of the transfer portal. He actually tried playing both ways a little bit at Minnesota last year. Will have a role on special teams as a kick returner, punt returner, just an athletic freak back there at safety. So that defense may be among the best in college football this year. So fall camp intel for the Oregon Ducks, and that wraps up tonight's show. Really appreciate everybody that was listening live. If you haven't already, and you happen to find your way to the show tonight, make sure that you're subscribed. Please, please, please subscribe to the channel. If you think you're subscribed, just go ahead and double check. It will be back on Tuesday. We have I'm going to rank the Big Ten quarterbacks, and then I'm going to make my Heisman prediction on air on Thursday night. And then next week, we're full speed ahead. We're ramping this thing up to 3 shows a week. First show will be on Monday. We'll go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Same time, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Continue rock and rolling with us. In the meantime, take care, and we'll talk to you again on Thursday. God bless.